Hello and welcome to our King George Ante-post forum. I'm afraid Nick Watts can't be with us today, but we still have the wisdom of Graham Rodway and Ed Quigley looking ahead to the Christmas showpiece. Graham, let's start with Cuard. Now he's been propelled into favouritism after his brilliant performance in the Betfair Chase. 11-4 though, is that too short?
Well, you could argue that he should be shorter because I think he's already beaten Dynast, hasn't he, quite easily. He's already beaten Silviniaco Conti quite easily. So he holds the two main market rivals just behind him in the market on that form. There's something about that run. Either I'm just going to completely keep getting this horse Cuard wrong, and I don't know what I'm talking about, which is possible. But I would suggest that there was something too good to be true about that run, that Betfair Chase. It was so easy for Cuard in a race that I thought was one of the best races we'd seen for a long, long time. A race that I thought was up there to rival a Gold Cup. And I just couldn't believe the way that Cuard just blew them away. Now, maybe he's an absolute superstar in the sense, if you take that form literally, he probably is. I just have a feeling that he's probably not. I remember last year at Ascot, in the Ascot Chase, over 2.5, I backed Captain Chris to beat him. And I remain absolutely convinced that if Captain Chris had stood up that day, then Captain Chris would have taken Cuard's measure quite comfortably. And that was over 2.5. I think Captain Chris has got the potential to improve for 3 miles. And he's in the race. So you're on a right-handed track, similar to Ascot that day. Stiff 2-mile 5 that day at Ascot, 3 miles this time. And you've got Cuard in at 11-4, Captain Chris in at 25. To me, I don't understand that run last time at Haydock. Just too good to be true, and I can't have it. So 11-4, I'm going to be taking him on, but there'll be plenty willing to wade in at 11-4 because he does hold the two main market rivals.
And what do you think, Ed? Is Graham being a bit harsh there on Cuard?
Well, it's all just subjective, isn't it, really? If you take that race on face value, then the rest of these may as well just not turn up, because if he jumps around and can end 30 lengths clear of Bobsworth and 8 lengths clear of Dynast, etc., then he will just jump these into the ground again. It is always the worry when you get one piece of form that is so far elevated from what he's shown beforehand. I mean, let's not forget he did still win the Ryanair Chase convincingly, but this was like to a new level. This was being billed as a race, worthy of the Gold Cup. And as Graham says, he just absolutely took them to the cleaners and put all doubts to rest that he doesn't see out 3 miles. So, I mean, he's my idea of the winner, really, but 11-4, I mean, it's not really going to appeal to me. I do not see how he's out the 3 if he jumps around, and just on price grounds alone, I'm not going to sit here and pick a favourite month 4 race, but I think he's got cast iron.
So could you see Dynast reversing the form? Because he ran a blinder that day, didn't he, behind Cuard?
It's definitely possible because he travelled well, didn't he? He travelled very strongly. David Pipe said he possibly might need the run, so he could come on for it. And you're switching back to Kempton, where Dynast was so impressive when winning last year at Christmas, and Cuard's form at Kempton doesn't stack up in the same way that Dynast does. So I could definitely see Dynast reversing the form at Kempton over Christmas, particularly if the ground was on the soft side. But he's no great value, is he, to do so at 4-1? I think there's only, what, 1.25 points between him and Cuard, and if a literal interpretation of the Cuard run suggests that Cuard should be a lot shorter, I don't think there's any value in Dynast.
Yeah, and Ed, you're not so keen on Dynast.
I think he'll run his race again and just not quite be good enough. I get a feeling, maybe unfairly at this stage, because he's still fairly unexposed, that he's going to be one of those horses that is just below the top notch. And I don't. The only way you see Dynast turning the form round with Cuard is if it comes up totally bottomless, because he goes in testing ground. He won the Feltham last year in heavy ground by distance. So the ground conditions won't be a problem. That would be the only way I'd really see Dynast beating Cuard, would be if it came up a bog. But again, at 4-1, it doesn't really make any appeal to me to get stuck in now. I'd rather wait and back him at 11-4 on the day, knowing it was absolutely bottomless, than, what's a point now, personally. So, no, Dynast doesn't make any appeal to me.
And what do you think of Alpha Off? Do you think he's overpriced at 8-1?
Well, I've got vested interest because I backed him in August, so I'm going to have to talk through my pocket here to some extent, but which I can't do anything else other than do so. He's my idea of, if Cuard's not going to win, Alpha Off's the one here who still holds that massive unexposed tag and can really serve it up to him. I mean, we saw him blast apart the field in testing ground at Cheltenham to win the Paddy Bauer Gold Cup. He was given a stone to walk on that day, and the rest all came home in a different postcode. Unfortunately, this time last year, as I said, I got a lovely text from Graham Rodway when I was in Marks and Spencer's, just alerting me to the fact that my anti-post dreams are all down the pan. So I'm hoping, touch wood, that things stay this way this time around, that he stays fit, because I still think 8-1 now. I'm struggling to see if he jumps round. I don't see him out the 3 at all. I just still think he's a cracking each way, but he still comes here totally unexposed. I know that race last time in the Amlin Chase was somewhat for farce. You know, he didn't really prove anything other than he had 4 legs still, but what it did show you was the engine was there. It was a perfect prep run. He goes right-handed. He'll go on any ground. I mean, he's won a Supreme Novice Hurdle on the fastest ground officially he's ever encountered on a going stick, and yet he won a Paddy Power on the most testing ground he's ever encountered on a going stick. So ground doesn't bother me. The trip won't bother me. I mean, he's a Dom Alcove. They go well over 3 miles. I love everything about him. He's 8-1. I just think he's an each-way banker. So, yeah, for me, it's between him and Cuard, and he represents the value.
You're on Alpha Off as well, are you, Graham?
Yeah, he's got an ideal profile, hasn't he? He's a grey for a start. We all know Grey's got a great record in this race. No, more seriously, he was so impressive when he won the Paddy Power last season. I just thought he was going to go on and win the King George. I thought it was absolutely made for him, the race. He was really well on top under quite a big weight at Cheltenham, and he looked for all the world that 3 miles on a flat track like Kempton was going to suit. Things didn't go to plan afterwards. Obviously, he'd been off a long time, and we didn't really learn much about him when he returned to Ascot a couple of weeks ago. However, it did prove that he's still got the engine, and he jumped round quite nicely. There were some strange leaps towards the finish of the race. The last sort of 2 or 3 jumps, he seemed to get ultra bold at them.
Really stood off, didn't he?
Really standing off at them. Now, I'm not sure that I want to see too much of that, because I'm quite a believer that if you can jump economically, you save your energy. And I think jumping like he was towards the finish, it takes a lot out of you. And I wouldn't want to see him going around Kempton jumping quite so enthusiastically. But before that, he'd looked quite good, hadn't he? He'd been quite economical, and I'm expecting the same in the King George. And for me, he's a much better chance than Silvianaco Conti, who's from the same stable and is slightly lower, slightly shorter price. Silvianaco Conti, to me, looks like a horse that is best on a left-handed flat track. He was beaten over Christmas at Kempton a couple of years ago by Grand Cru in the novice chase that Dynast won last year. And I just felt all along that Silvianaco Conti's race was the Betfair chase. I just felt he would win that race. I felt Paul Nicholls would have him fairly close to spot on for that, because... But
Nicholls has said he will come on a lot for that run.
I suppose he's got to say that, hasn't he? Because his horse was beaten so easily by Cuard and Dynast. Either Silvianaco Conti isn't as good as he looked when he was cruising coming down the hill in the Gold Cup, or he's not quite the same horse. As we saw win the Betfair last year, he was very disappointing at Aintree, and for me, his finishing effort at Haydock was very, very tame after travelling into the race like a decent horse. So I couldn't have Silvianaco Conti. I much prefer Alpha Off, and he's a bigger price. All
right, and we can't forget Long Run, of course, can we, Ed? He's won this twice. Are people too quick to write him off?
Well, I'm one of those who stuck with him. I actually tipped him for the Betfair chase, and the positives from that race were he was probably the best round of jumping he'd done for 2 seasons. And he actually travelled with quite a lot of zest. But what is becoming worrying with Long Run now is that the engine just seemed to cut out. He just dropped away tamely. If you go back to some of those battles he had with Courto Star in the Betfair chases, etc., even when he was being beaten by Courto Star back in 2011, Sam Whaley-Cohen asked him to respond, and he ran all the way to the line, didn't give up. Now it seems when push comes to shove, the light just goes out. I'm just starting to think he's had his day. He's a French horse who peaked early, and you can never really rule him out of the contest. If it came up heavy ground and turned into war of attrition, given his record round here, he does have the calibre to have a say, but I just think his best days are behind him, and as much as I'd like to see him run a big race, with the horses that are potentially in and around him here, providing it's a decent ground contest, I could not see him winning the King George.
And you have some quite strong opinions on Long Run, don't you, Graham?
Yeah, I can't have Long Run. I think he's well gone at the game. And yeah, I'd much rather back Captain Chris. If I had to have a long shot, Captain Chris at 25s. If the ground come up decent for him, he loves going right-handed. and he wasn't that far behind Cuard when falling in the Ascot race last year. So on a strict line through those two, that suggests Captain Chris is too big a price. But Alpha Off is my main bet.
All right, quick word on a couple of the others. Mount Benbulben, he's an interesting one.
Real Jekyll and Hyde character. I was just saying, it's really worrying how much we're agreeing, because when Nick Watts is here, we totally disagree. But
Well, he'd be going for dinner, so you'd definitely be disagreeing.
But yeah, very quickly, Mount Benbulben. He's obviously got a lot of ability. He's got a big engine. Connections confirmed he's going to this race. He needs to go right-handed. That's pretty much half the reason why he is coming here. The problem is, though, every time he goes towards a fence, you just want to do this, don't you?
Yeah, his jumping's not great.
His jumping's not great. When he puts it together, he's obviously got a lot of ability. He would have taken hand in the JM Wine Chase last time. He was travelling really well, 4 out, 4 coming down. He slaughtered the novices at Punchestown at the end of last season. He still does bring that unknown quantity, whereas you know where you are with a lot of the others. This thing still has the ability to be anything. I just do worry about his jumping at top level around here. I could see him hitting one and that being curtained. So, no, I'd have to rule him out.
And finally, Graham, Menorah.
Yeah, it won't be good enough, Menorah.
You think he might be, Ed?
I don't think he will be. All very quickly depends
For a
on what
place?
connections want to do with Captain Chris and Menorah in terms of targets, because if one runs, the other won't, I think. So, for me to sum up, I think it's between Cuard, Alpha Ov and Captain Chris. That's my reverse tri-cast. I'm hoping Alpha Ov wins, but I do think it's between those three.
And Graham, you're Captain Chris and Alpha Off.
Yep.
All right, well, good luck, lads, and thank you for that.
Cheers.